Welcome to this explainer. So, for all you focused learners out there, today we're taking a seriously fascinating leap back in time. We are going to translate ancient Greek philosophy, specifically Aristotle's absolute masterpiece on rhetoric, into a highly practical, modern playbook for influence. Because, let's face it, whether you're leading a team, selling a product, or, just trying to navigate everyday relationships, understanding the actual mechanics of persuasion, it's an absolute game changer. Let me just start off by asking you a quick question. Why do some people always seem to get exactly what they desire? I mean, we've all seen it, right? There is always that one person who just naturally lands more sales, builds better relationships, and gets instant buy-in on their ideas, even if they aren't actually the most experienced person in the room. It can be incredibly frustrating if you don't know their secret, right? Well, the ultimate answer to this very modern problem was actually formalized over 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece. The great orator Cicero kind of hit the nail on the head, defining rhetoric as the art of using language to impress hearers and influence them for or against a certain course of action. So it isn't just about sounding smart. No, it's a completely systematic approach to shaping human decisions and actions. Okay, let's dive right into this. Today, we'll be covering the secret to persuasion, the persuasion triangle, the pursuit of happiness, the noble and the good, and finally, harnessing human emotion. So, part 1, the secret to persuasion. Let's look at the actual architect behind this whole framework. You see, Aristotle wasn't just some dusty philosopher theorizing in a vacuum. He was literally the original master of rhetoric. In fact, he tutored Alexander the Great. I mean, talk about high-stakes persuasion. In those early democracies, power wasn't just handed down. It was won through public eloquence. Aristotle basically used empirical methods to combat the dangerous influence of untutored, manipulative orators. He figured out exactly how and why persuasion works, and he standardized it into a completely learnable science. Moving on to section 2, the persuasion triangle. Okay, this is the core foundational framework that makes any act of persuasion actually function. And it all starts with ethos. Ethos is all about you, the speaker. It is the absolute first step in getting an audience to trust you. Look, before anyone listens to your brilliant idea or buys your product, they unconsciously evaluate your character. If they don't perceive you as credible, polite, and authoritative, well, the communication basically breaks down before it even starts. Now, once you've successfully established your ethos, we move right along to PATHOS. And what's really interesting here is that the focus shifts entirely to your listener. PATHOS requires you to stir them emotions. You do this by highlighting fairness, presenting the facts in a way that really appeals to their sympathies, and weaving a coherent, compelling story. It's really about making them feel deeply why your proposition matters to them on a personal level. And finally, we round out the triangle with logos. This is the underlying logic of the message itself. Logos relies heavily on a carefully structured theme, clear precedents, and persuasive authorities. It's where you apply your key facts to the scenario at hand so that the listener thinks, yes, logically, this is for sure the only correct path to take. But actually, I want to pause here for a second and give you a very practical ethos action plan. To pull this off, you need to be likable, heavily prepared, completely honest about the weaknesses in your argument, highly organized, exceptionally clear, and, dressed appropriately for your specific environment. Because without these foundational traits, I guarantee you, even the absolute best logic will just fall flat in a modern boardroom. You really have to look and act the part. Which brings us to section 3, the pursuit of happiness. So, now that we have the basic mechanics down, let's pivot to some advanced tactics. We're going to introduce the ultimate psychological lever. Aristotle realized that the supreme goal of literally all human action is happiness. Every single decision your listener makes maps back to a few core desires. And then think about it in modern terms. Why do we buy a youth cream? For health and an admirable persona. Why does a client agree to your cost reduction pitch? To amass wealth and secure a good old age. When you explicitly connect your pitch to these ancient, hardwired human cravings for security, reputation, and prosperity, your persuasion becomes incredibly powerful.
All right, section 4, the noble and the good.
And this brilliantly illustrates how much of persuasion actually relies on strategically juxtaposing choices to highlight value. For instance, you could pitch something as homegrown or self-taught, which automatically feels harder and therefore better than something that's just easily acquired. Or think about the rare versus abundant comparison. Gold is rare, right? That makes it highly valued for possession, whereas water is super abundant, making its value lie purely in its sheer utility. Mastering these kinds of contrasts allows you to frame your proposal as the objectively greater good. Now, beyond just mere convenience, you really must align your subject with virtues of nobility. If your proposal promotes justice, courage, restraint, magnificence, or generosity, it suddenly becomes intrinsically attractive. At the end of the day, people want to feel that saying yes to you makes them a good, honorable person. They want to feel like they are driving growth or acting with real courage. And that leads us to our final section, Section 5, Harnessing Human Emotion.
Look, wielding specific emotional triggers is pretty much a true superpower for any persuader. So let's start with a volatile one, anger. Aristotle defines it as a painful desire for revenge after a belittlement. People don't just get randomly angry out of nowhere. No, they get angry when their unrequited desires are opposed, mocked, or just met with complete forgetfulness. If a client feels like you forgot their needs or disregarded their status, well, anger is just the natural emotional response.
So how do you handle it? To persuade an angry audience, you have to systematically diffuse them. Step 1, you really have to understand the trigger. Then you suspend and placate. You do this by humbling yourself, confessing a mistake, or showing deep, genuine respect. And why does this work? Because nobody continues to be angry at someone who agrees they are inferior or acts incredibly respectful in that heated moment. Only once you have removed their pain and established a sense of calm can you safely introduce your main subject.
Let's see how this builds into our next set of contrasting emotions, fear versus confidence. Showing a listener the close proximity of an impending danger, like, say, losing market share, creates massive urgency and fear. But here is the trick. You don't just leave them there. You then pivot immediately to building unshakable confidence by highlighting past successes, abundant resources, and incredibly safe solutions. Essentially, you use fear to wake them up and confidence to make them actually move in your direction.
Finally, we have shame, which is deeply, deeply connected to reputation. What your listener fears most is disrepute in the eyes of the people they admire. Triggers of shame include things like cowardice, illiberality, or small-mindedness. So by subtly framing the rejection of your idea as a step towards small-mindedness or injustice, you're actually using the audience's very natural desire to protect their own honor as a driving force towards agreement. It is incredibly effective.
Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought to wrap up this explainer. Aristotle's framework, balancing ethos, pathos, and logos, truly leveraging the human pursuit of happiness and mastering emotional triggers like anger and confidence, is a highly potent secret. I mean, it's been working for over 2 millennia. So now that you hold these ancient keys to human influence, what will you persuade the world to do next?